Recently, I came across a piece titled, "Charity Displays Hundreds of Shoes to Raise Awareness of Child Suicide. Behind every statistic is a life needlessly and tragically lost." And in the piece, the author of the piece explained that a charity has displayed hundreds of children's shoes on the steps of an events hall to raise awareness of the prevalence of child suicide in the UK. Chasing the Stigma is a Liverpool-based charity with the primary aim of destigmatizing mental illness, working alongside other mental health charities including Papyrus and the Oscar Phillips Foundation. Chasing the Stigma organized for 226 pairs of shoes to be placed on the steps of St. George's Hall in the center of Liverpool. Each pair of shoes represents one of the young lives that was lost to suicide in 2017. The statistics are utterly heartbreaking, but for many people, they either aren't aware of the numbers or the reality of the figures doesn't hit home, says Jake Mills, founder of Chasing the Stigma. Behind every statistic is a life needlessly and tragically lost. All of the shoes used in the display were donated to the charity. Now, mental health is a subject that we probably don't talk about enough as we should. And it is a very sensitive subject, but it is also a very important subject. The notion of children valuing their lives so little or hating their lives so much to the point that they'd rather die is honestly heartbreaking. Unfortunately, not all kids are born into a good environment to be raised in. Some have to deal with growing up in poverty. Some have to deal with having parents that, to put it nicely, aren't great. Some have to deal with being abused. Some have to deal with being homeless. And some have to deal with bullies at school, in their neighborhood, or sadly, even in their own home. And I could go on and on. But for more on the matter, I'd like to turn to a piece from an expert in the field, from Psychology Today, titled, "Why Do Young Children Commit Suicide?" in which the author of the piece, a clinical director in the psychiatry department at Tulane University Medical Center, stated that there's perhaps nothing more shocking than hearing about young children taking their own life. It is difficult for us to comprehend that children as young as 5 could even conceive of killing themselves. There has been a widely held belief among adults that young children do not have the planning ability or understanding of death's finality to consciously make this decision. Yet they do. The list of potential risks is endless. The important thing is to recognize that children as young as 5 do kill themselves. What can we do? We can recognize that if a child is thinking about suicide, that it is an indication that they are experiencing a great deal of pain and distress. You can never go wrong with talking and listening to a child. Ignoring their thoughts and feelings is much more of a problem and could lead to deadly results. Parents should talk to their pediatrician and contact a therapist to help the child and family cope. Additionally, parents can help their children to develop resilience and problem-solving skills by asking them what they would do in different situations that might be harmful or dangerous for them. Practicing in a safe environment allows them to think through scenarios so they can be better prepared to cope more effectively with adversity. At the present time, there is not enough research on treatment-based outcomes with young children to have a therapeutic proven approach for working with them. So that's important to note in that there is no therapeutic proven approach to working with children in terms of preventing them from wanting to commit suicide. But there are a couple of other things that I think are really worth noting here. First is what I was kind of alluding to earlier, in that when children are thinking about committing suicide, it is an indication that they are going through a great deal of pain or distress. And that's the key aspect of this issue that we really have to understand. If we are able to properly identify the pain or distress these children are feeling and alleviate it, then that's how we are hopefully going to be able to get these children to no longer wish to commit suicide. Moreover, as the author of the piece also explains, talking and listening to children is very important. It is very important because, first of all, we may not even realize children are going through the great deal of distress and pain that could lead them to committing suicide if we aren't communicating with them. But also, even if we are aware that something is amiss, if we don't talk to them and try to better understand what they are going through and what the root cause of their distress is, then how are we supposed to help them? We need to know what is causing their pain if we're going to be able to help them and try and fix what it is that ails them. Now, as the author alludes to, a therapist can help in this regard, although I'd personally be very careful in choosing a therapist for a child. Ideally and hopefully, you can find a therapist you know on a personal level and who you have a great deal of confidence in to entrust your child to. Entrusting your child to someone you don't know when it comes to something as important such as this is something I don't think any of us would want to do. Now, the author of this piece also brings up the idea of role playing and walking through certain situations and discussing how to handle them, which I think is a great idea when it comes to dealing with issues such as bullying. If children know the proper steps and are prepared to handle difficult situations such as how to handle a bully effectively, it can go a long way in terms of preventing the great distress or pain that leads to children wanting to commit suicide from ever occurring in the children's lives in the first place. But there are other things that can help in terms of preventing child suicides as well, like schools. As the author of the aforementioned piece explains, schools are the most logical place to start as children spend the majority of their time there. Personnel at the schools are often the first ones to become aware that a child may be having problems. Essentially, anyone working with young children should be alert to the fact that children of any age can be vulnerable to suicidal thoughts and feelings. Taking them seriously and intervening might prevent an attempt or completion now for younger as well as older children. Now, this is very important to keep in mind. Kids spend most of their time in school, so keeping in touch with kids' teachers and guidance counselors to see how the kids are doing in terms of their behavior could go a long way to helping to identify any type of distress or pain a child may be experiencing in order to hopefully address and alleviate the root of the distress in a timely manner. Now look, in closing, I want to make it very clear that I am not an expert on mental health, but at the same time, what I do know and feel confident in saying is that we have to do everything we can to try and prevent kids from feeling like they rather die than live. And in order to do this, we have to try to do our best to alleviate the stresses that cause kids to want to end their lives. Every child's life is precious. Every child's. Every person's life in general is precious. And thus, we as a people need to do a better job in making sure that our children wholeheartedly believe and feel that their lives are lives that are most certainly worth living. Because they most certainly are.